SpongeBob practically raised lots of us. It took care of us. And that's why the moments it strayed from being the funny haha cartoon we loved left this sinking feeling behind. It was not afraid to push the limits. It showed us things that we felt we weren't supposed to be seeing, and then the episode would just end. And we're still thinking about it all these years later. So let's take a look back at these moments and break down how they were able to really stick in our minds to this day. When you think about creepy SpongeBob episodes, I'm willing to bet that Graveyard Shift is one of the first you think of. This episode is a masterclass example of children's horror. We get something familiar in the Krusty Krab, but we get to see it
at night.
SpongeBob and Squidward are forced to work later so that the business can cash in on some nocturnal customers, all beginning from a scene that would become a future real-life horror for those of us who would go on to work in food service.
Why?
Are you open?
Read the sign.
I'll have a Krabby Patty Deluxe and a double chili kelp fries.
While SpongeBob was initially excited about working late, the eeriness of seeing this usually bright and bubbling establishment become quiet and dim eventually got to him as he had to take the trash outside in the dark. And in this scene, there's an interesting detail in the sky. The flowers that are usually round and lively are now dark and wilted. That's also without mentioning the sickly green coloring outside, which again differs from how nights usually look. This shade being a deliberate choice, as green is a very common color in horror due to its sickly nature. Poison, mold, disease, death, whatever your mind goes to first, it's sure to unsettle. Perfectly reflecting how SpongeBob's view of the darkness quickly changes when the reality of the situation hits him. One moment, normal night skies. The next, an environment shaped by fear. Squidward picks up on this and mischievously tells SpongeBob the scary story of the hash-slinging slasher, a former Krusty Krab employee who chopped off his own hand. Even though we know he's making it up on the spot, we're still gripped by this tale. In the end, after he tells a frightened SpongeBob it was all a joke, we knew there'd be more to come out of this. Even Squidward himself starts to become unsettled when he hears mysterious sounds. The atmosphere tenses up even more when the lights start to flicker, one of the signs of the slasher's arrival from Squidward's story, followed by the second sign, the phone ringing with no one on the other end. As Squidward, the designated mature character here, becomes more and more rattled, the tension is allowed to be broken when he mistakes the green slime oozing from the walls as one of the signs. But it always does that. This is actually a reference to 1979's The Amityville Horror, but instead of blood here, it's just green slime. Fitting considering both the meaning of green we talked about a moment ago, and also because, it's Nickelodeon. Green slime is their thing. But back to the episode. As the tension is allowed to build up again, we see a very unusually late night bus cut through the dense fog and drop someone off across the street. And it was at this point where I would always look away because what followed was completely and utterly the most terrifying thing I have seen up to that point in my life as a very, very young child. There was always something about red eyes peeking out of the darkness that got to me, and I'm glad I'm not alone here. I actually rewatched these episodes with my Discord community, and they said they felt the exact same. By the way, if you ever want to hang out and watch stuff with us, you're more than welcome to. The link to our Discord is down below. Looking forward to seeing you over there. Anyway, the danger here is quickly dispelled as the slasher turns out to be just some guy trying to get a job. But there's still the mystery of who was flickering the lights.
Nosferatu!
I'm sure most of the people who watched this episode had no idea who Count Orlok, aka Nosferatu, was. To many, he was just a creepy looking guy who liked to mess with Krusty Krab patrons by turning the lights off and on. And to think, we almost didn't get this ending. There was initially a character called Floorboard Harry that SpongeBob would deliver mail to, and it was he who was planned to flicker the lights. I am so glad that they didn't go through with this because the use of Nosferatu, a very out of place reference, worked so well compared to anything else they could have done. It was in tune with the show's identity that you truly could not expect what was going to happen next. And so, in 2024, when the new Nosferatu movie premiered, its director, Robert Eggers, would actually thank SpongeBob for introducing this character to so many people at such a young age. And that right there is one of the things that made the show so special. It didn't coddle its young viewers. Its shocking moments came from an aspiration to entertain first and foremost. In the episode Shanghaied, when SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward board the Flying Dutchman's ship and are forced to be his crew, Squidward pushes back and, as punishment, gets the Fly of Despair. This is another scene where I had to sometimes look away. The first time I saw this, I was stunned by what I was looking at. The off-putting imagery, the demonic laughter, the implication that this was only a mere glimpse into what this dimension held. SpongeBob and Patrick's expressions mirrored my own as we all bore witness to this punishment. And then, the Fly gets zipped back up and the episode continues. Like I said earlier, you really didn't know what was going to happen next on this show. There's another episode that did this very well. Rock Bottom. When SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally take the wrong bus to an unfamiliar town, they're taken aback by how different everything is. It's darker, the soil is alive, and the fish coming out from the confusing bathrooms are unlike any we have ever seen on the show before. Their appearance being based on real-life deep-sea creatures accentuates how out of place these two are. At the very least, they have each other.
Hey SpongeBob, the bus is here!
Now, SpongeBob is truly alone. And as funny and frustratingly relatable the following sequences of him trying to catch the bus are, there's still this anxious feeling looming overhead. As a young child, this was the creepiest aspect for me about this whole episode, being lost and alone. I couldn't comprehend even being in a situation like that. A very similar feeling developed with another, much more milder show, Arthur. There was an episode where he slept on the bus and missed his stop, causing him to end up in an unfamiliar part of town. Obviously, these two shows are miles apart from each other, and what they're trying to accomplish with this topic is vastly different. But just the notion of what they bring up unnerved me so much. If this happened in real life, why would I be away from home? Why would I be alone? Where are my parents? Would anyone help me, or would I really be on my own? I remember being so scared of something like this happening that I dreaded whenever I'd have to take the bus for the first time. If I got lost a couple blocks away, sure, I could find myself back, but anything more than that, I wouldn't know what to do at all, and that terrified me. This is actually what happened to voice actor and one of the writers for this episode, Mr. Lawrence, who explained that this story was based off of a time where he and a friend got on the wrong bus in first grade. He recalls that sinking feeling of dread, realizing you're somewhere so unfamiliar. We're freaking out, and I'm about to burst into tears, but the kid I was with just had a massive meltdown. It was super traumatic, but it was one of those life lessons at a young age where you learn you don't have to freak out. That became the basis for Rock Bottom. And that's how a lot of episodes came out. It's stuff that kids could relate to right away and go, yes, that happened to me, and then see the way SpongeBob deals with it. He's scared and he's a little terrified, but he learns to cope with the fact. Like it or not, traumatic things that happen are perfect comedy. Thankfully, both of the endings for these episodes would reassure viewers like me that there can always be someone there to help. SpongeBob is still a children's program after all. Speaking of which, let's now talk about all the times it sort of forgets that. If you take away the comedic elements, the world of SpongeBob quickly becomes terrifying. In practically every episode, someone is either getting severely injured or has their body stretched and warped in ways a body shouldn't. And for some reason, it's Squidward that seems to get punished the most. I mean, why would the city of Bikini Bottom even have a vehicle like this? But going back to the beginning, the first instances of this type of horror came from SpongeBob's questionable anatomy and how accessible his insides and brain are. In Plankton, his body was taken over by a device planted onto his brain. His autonomy stripped away as all he could do was watch as he automatically moved to Plankton's commands. In Scaredy Pants, the show's first Halloween episode, aside from the horror of Sandy's very insensitive and offensive costume, throughout the whole episode, SpongeBob's constantly frightened and regarded as SpongeBob's Scaredy Pants. And when he tries to be on the other side of the scare, it doesn't go well for him. Wanting to change this, he enlists Patrick's help to reshape him into a scarier form, from square to round, so that he could pretend to be the Flying Dutchman. Chunks after chunks of his spongy flesh are shown being ripped off, but it seems to work out. It's this newfound confidence that allows him to crash the party, and when things go awry with the real Flying Dutchman showing up, it's SpongeBob's shaven body and exposed brain that spooks him and everyone else away. If you saw someone you know suddenly appear with half of their flesh off, with their cerebrum in clear view, and still wearing a smile, I'm sure you'd react the same way. Almost makes me glad that this close-up for the episode was left unused. But the show had no problem utilizing these types of drawings, appropriately named gross-ups, whenever it needed to accentuate the gruesome reality of a situation. This thinned the line between real life and cartoon, as these shots were much more detailed, to an often grotesque degree. Used sparingly, the shock added to the humor of the scene. However, as the years went on, the later seasons would use these more and more alongside upping the cartoonish injuries that the cast go through. And at its worst, it just puts a bad taste in the viewer's mouth. Episodes like The Splinter, where SpongeBob's thumb undergoes a tremendous amount of suffering, are good examples of this type of over-the-top graphicness. And the most notable case of this has to be House Fancy. I'm sure that just mentioning this moment here made you wince. This is the episode where, when SpongeBob is helping Squidward move a sofa, he accidentally pushes it onto Squidward's toe and pushes it even further, ultimately pulling it back, dragging his toenail clean off. And of course, it doesn't end there, because the sofa leg is dropped right on the exposed toe. It's stuff like this that just goes too far. Where is the funny? By breaking the usual rules of cartoon physics and making the violence more realistic, its value is diminished to just pure shock factor. This is a reason why the earlier seasons are praised more. There was a balance. That's not to say the later seasons didn't have standout scenes, especially when it comes to evolutionary horror, when a body transforms into something else. In SquidBob Tentacle Pants, after Sandy's teleportation device glitches out, SpongeBob and Squidward become fused together. And later on, due to technological carelessness, many others join them as they become one singular flesh creature. Everyone involved left obviously uncomfortable. In Krabby Patty Creature Feature, a scientifically modified new recipe causes the citizens of Bikini Bottom to turn into these zombie-like monsters who strive for nothing more than to expand their colony. This is done by force-feeding the new patties to their victims, which can also be done by self-mutilation, as they could tear off parts of their own bodies to shove into people's mouths. But the episode I really want to focus on right now is from that golden age. I was a teenage Gary. After Squidward neglects feeding Gary when SpongeBob is away, a snail doctor is called in and assesses that Gary just needs a dose of snail plasma to get better. However, he's too squeamish to administer it himself, and so is SpongeBob, thus leaving Squidward no choice but to do it himself. But SpongeBob keeps telling him to wait, and wait, and wait, and after multiple attempts, SpongeBob is accidentally injected. As it turns out, Gary just needed some water, and you probably do too, so this is your reminder to drink up. As great as this discovery was, SpongeBob is still concerned about the shot, but Squidward assures him that he'll be fine. Later on, when feeding Gary, SpongeBob, giving into temptation, tastes the canned food and actually enjoys it. causing him to finish the whole thing, even letting out a meow. As he tries to convince himself that it's all okay, more things about him start to change. He moves slowly, his eyelids droop, his body shakes, and his eyes bulge out as his form gets distorted, taking shape as the snail plasma does its thing. Over at Squidward's house, his doorbell rings, and when he goes over to check, he's horrified by what he finds. And then in a moment that still causes me great unease to this day, he softly taps on SpongeBob's snail eye, causing it to retract. Squidward panics and shuts the door, barricading himself as Snail Bob desperately meows and tries to get inside, begging for help. But Squidward's efforts are all for naught as he eventually breaks in, causing Squidward to flee in circles, literally flipping his house upside down. And amongst the chaos, he has accidentally injected himself with the same snail plasma that SpongeBob received. His fate is already written. In the episode's final moments, we see the three snails singing on a fence together, seemingly accepting this new reality. This story really stuck with me. I remember feeling things that I couldn't describe, feelings that I just never had. This was the first time the notion of a body transforming in such a way was planted in my mind. And over time, I would continue to be uncomfortable whenever a children's show or movie had some sort of sequence like this. And don't even get me started on those Animorph book covers. But in a strange way, this episode sort of primed me for actual body horror in mature movies. To this day, I cannot look at any sort of evolutionary horror without first being reminded of SpongeBob getting injected with the snail plasma. This, of course, was but one of many times where the show just made me feel a certain type of way. By the way, if you're enjoying this, please consider subscribing. It really does help out a lot. Thanks. I can recall multiple instances where the show wasn't intending to really scare me, but it still left a lasting impression. In ARG, when SpongeBob and Patrick look at the map that Mr. Krabs is obsessed with and then realize it's just a board game map, their eyes sink into their sockets. This effect lingers for an uncomfortable amount of time. In Wormy, SpongeBob and Patrick befriend Sandy's pet caterpillar, but as it undergoes its real-life footage metamorphosis, the music becomes dark and dramatic, giving the viewer a sense of dread, warning them of what's to come. When they discover his jar is worm-free, they're confused and open it up for further inspection, freeing the newly formed butterfly, causing it to get up close to SpongeBob's face and, well, you know the rest. This footage is actually of a horsefly, which makes further sense because butterflies don't buzz. I, of course, did not put that all together as a child. I was too distracted by the eerie absurdity of these scenes. And I, of course, have to mention Ugh for having a reference I was far too young to understand. The episode follows the cast caveman ancestors. When lightning strikes a log, a fire appears, frightening everyone. When SpongeGar tries to collect some food, he trips and throws it right on to the burning flame. Squawk scolds him for this, but it is in this moment that something connects within SpongeGar. The stick that Squawk is holding, the food lost in the fire. He looks back and forth, and these three are showed over and over as the musical tension rises, which is revealed to be coming from a barbershop quartet. This is how SpongeGar figures out how to use fire for cooking. A ginormous discovery that's a reference to Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, where a similar track plays when the obelisk appears, which is followed by an ape realizing they could use a bone as a weapon, altering the future of the species. Again, I could not properly appreciate the reference at the time, especially because 1, I have not watched this movie, and 2, this was just so unnerving to me. I knew what it was setting up, but still, it made me very uncomfortable. It's a good thing that the writers thought this would be the case, considering that they added the barbershop quartet here to help break the scene's tension, reminding the viewer that everything here is just for jokes. Going back to the feelings of dread, there were whole episodes about that. I was very anxious during the entirety of Hooky when SpongeBob kept playing around on the hooks, despite Mr. Krabs' warnings. And I found this comment from Patrick particularly disturbing.
Where is everybody?
I don't know. There was one kid here earlier.
The framing of the abandoned pair of shoes here alongside the hooks, they contrast with Patrick's cheery demeanor. It was loud and clear what the danger here would be. You understood the potential consequences, and I remember getting so scared for SpongeBob when he just kept going on them. I felt the exact same during Nasty Patty, after SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs think they accidentally took out the health inspector and then try to dispose of his body. It was so out of left field, and it felt like I should not have been watching what I was watching, especially after the cops show up and everyone, including myself, becomes even more on edge. I didn't want SpongeBob to go to jail. And there's something else about the show that did not fail at creeping me out back then and even now. The end screen music. If you ever fall asleep and woke up to this playing, you know what I'm talking about. The feeling of seeing something familiar. The Hawaiian-style background with bright colors, the regular font, it's all there. But something felt so wrong. You know what credits are, but why is this so unnerving? What is it about the song that could put someone into such a state of panic? There are a couple possible reasons for this. What I relate to most is that I just didn't really hear this outro a lot. On Nickelodeon, the audio for the credits would be cut off to promote something else, so I first heard this from a DVD collection that let the full credits roll uninterrupted. It could also be due to how the music itself was composed, as the dissonance of notes caused an uneasy feeling, especially for a show that's supposed to be so lively. This all could also be why the walk cycle sequence was creepy to some viewers. That, alongside the various expressions SpongeBob was making, while also, as young children, not really understanding what the purpose of a walk cycle was. It was so unnatural watching him shift from expression to expression. And there's still so many horror aspects of the show that we haven't talked about that probably deserve videos in their own right. Planet of the Jellyfish was an alien takeover story. One Krabs Trash dealt with grave desecration and fighting off an undead army. Both Fear of a Krabby Patty and Squeaky Boots revolved around psychological horror, the latter being directly influenced by Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart, where Mr. Krabs is haunted by the boots he disposed of. The ending of Spongehenge and Squidward's Alone Time in SB129 tackled existentialism. And again, not to mention all the other visually disturbing scenes throughout the series. It's no wonder that the show has had such a presence in internet horror, even going on to reference their influence themselves when they parodied the Red Mist creepypasta in Randomland. You can find way more on that in this video here, by the way. But something I realized while working on this is how much I related to Ghost Host. In this episode, the Flying Dutchman spends so much time scaring SpongeBob that he eventually just stops being frightening. He tries his best to get a reaction out of him, but nothing. I bring this up because this is kind of what happened to me. As I grew older, I just exposed myself to more and more horror, that I've become a bit numb to it. I don't really get scared anymore, and I kind of miss that. When I'm playing a horror game and something jumps out at me, I barely react. I used to be absolutely terrified of the Red Mist Squidward image, but now it's just nothing to me, and that kind of sucks. Don't get me wrong, I can still appreciate the spooky media I take in, but somewhere along the way, I just lost that sense of enjoyable fear that I felt back when I first saw some of these. At the very least, despite being desensitized, I'm very thankful that I was able to experience these moments at a young age, especially because they were so relatable to so many others. I actually almost didn't make this video because I was unsure of how to go about it. But I was very much reassured when I started talking to people about this topic. I even met someone new, and when I referenced spooky episodes to them, seeing them light up because of it, it really hit how much more in common we all have, even if we're strangers, considering we've experienced so much of the same things. Just remember that. But for now, I want to hand over this conversation to you guys. Please, do tell me what you think of all this and what your standout horror moments from the show were, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Hold on, real quick, I just want to let everyone know that if you become a member, you can not only further support the channel, but also have your name here at the end of the video. Of course, just seeing my stuff is free, and I'm really glad you guys enjoy my creations. Anything above that is not expected, but more than appreciated. So nonetheless, either way, thank you so much for watching.